Are we reading too much into this? I mean, maybe just Lucas doesn't know what he's talking about.
We probably are reading too much into this. Definitely, yes. To some degree, the politics in Star Wars is not realistic generally. Like it seems like George Lucas doesn't know too much about how real politics works, and that itself can be a nice way of prompting you to think about how things don't work, how the things depicted in the movies wouldn't really work. I mean, one of them is that the way the Republic is depicted couldn't possibly last. Was it 1,000 years or 1,000 generations?
I think it's 1,000 generations.
1,000 generations, yeah. 1,000 years would be twice as long as the Roman Republic, which fell about 500 years in. 1,000 generations
that's longer than we've had human civilization.
So it would have to be a really well-designed political system, orders of magnitude more well-defined than humans on this planet have ever thought up. The basic setup, and Hans, correct me where I get this wrong, is there's a Senate, which and the senators are selected in some way from planets, I believe.
Yes.
And each planet sends some fixed number of senators to the Senate. The Senate seems to be able to remove the chancellor. I believe, Hans, can they select the chancellor?
It seems like it's a parlementary system. There's also reference to representatives, right? Because there's a representative bank system. So maybe it's a bicameral legislature, although it's not clear how that plays out. But it does seem like that the Senate selects a prime minister, and they can, they hold a vote of no confidence, and so you can remove the senator, the chancellor, and replace that person. And so, that's all, Matt.
Parliamentary systems of the systems we have now in the world existing now is a fairly stable system. So if it was a conventional parliamentary system, that's a pretty stable system.
Yeah. They rely heavily on parties, though, even more so than a presidential system does, right? Because you need to have, when you're sending your person to the parliament, you need to know who they're going to choose as chancellor. Or have some idea who they might choose as chancellor, right? And so you have to have, you got to know that, are you voting for the Sith party or the Jedi party or what? And you have to know, but there's no mention of this anywhere, right? So
maybe like the EU, there are parties within each planet, but in a Madisonian way, really a galaxy is too big for people to organize and try to take control of the government. Like the United States end up not being too big for organized factions to take over, but a galaxy may be too big.
Although if it's just that it takes a while, then you'd think 1,000 generations would be long enough for them to have figured that out.
If your equilibrium, you haven't gotten there in 1,000 generations, you're probably not getting there.
No, probably not.
Is it a case where they would have in the real world? Would they have developed, because in the world, in the existing Earth, on the existing Earth, people organize themselves into parties in pretty much every democracy, but definitely in parliamentary systems.
It's sort of necessary to be able to have any kind of anticipation. If you imagine that you were just sending some folks to a legislature and they were going to choose a chancellor, and they were just going to do whatever they wanted to do, then you have no idea who you're voting for, right? And you have to just really have to have a delegate model, right? Or a trustee model. You really have to believe you can trust the person to represent your planet when you get there.
Or maybe the planet that sends Jar Jar Binks really thinks he's trustworthy enough. Whatever Jar Jar's opinion is, we're gonna go with.
Yeah, that's right there. Right there, you're pushing against the boundaries of the logic, I think. but I mean, maybe that's the case. Although so then maybe the Republic is too big for the first 600 generations. But by the time you get light speed, right, by the time you can travel easily from planet to planet, you'd think they'd be able to work out these kinds of coordinations, right? The Jedi kind of have their organization that influences things across all over the place.
They seem to travel all over the galaxy and stay in communication. And I mean, then the Force, for all its power, doesn't seem to give them any advanced telecommunications power.
No, it's still using the hologram.
Still using the holograms,
Yeah. Maybe as you're suggesting that Jedi are this weird side parallel group, that they have some way of suppressing political organization in the legislature, right? That they are the ones who are they're providing the coordination, they're providing the focus, they're identifying the things, the issues that should be discussed. So they say they don't meddle in politics.
Well, I mean, so it gives it a natural party to develop. You could have a Sith party, but is the Jedi such that they're going to suppress some party? Like some parties don't exist because I mean the Sith are sort of enemies of the Jedi. Rather than trying to take over the Republic by force, the Sith had just organized a party and gotten some senators elected, and right? I mean, it seems like this shows you how awkward a situation it is with the Jedi. So are they gonna? I mean, sort of like in some countries, the military, if certain parties get elected, they intervene and override the election. I mean, for a long time in Turkey, the military would not step in to the results of parliamentary elections except when Islamist parties would get close or get elected, and then would intervene and block them. So I mean, you see how maybe the existence of the Jedi prevents these dark side from organizing in a more legitimate political way, which doesn't necessarily mean that they would be transformed to a less malevolent ideology, but they don't organize in politics, and no one seems to be organizing in politics into coalitions with coherent philosophies. And maybe one of the reasons is that, I mean, the Jedi don't meddle in politics, but they seem to have some sort of ideology in that they favor some types of organizations in the galaxy and not others. Right. It's hard to imagine that they're indifferent to who gets elected. So I mean, if Palpatine, I imagine early in his career before he was chancellor, if it's a parliamentary system, he was a senator. It's not depicted in the movies, but I assume he was. If he was openly a Sith senator, what do the Jedi do at that point? They apply he's hiding this, and the reason is why. If the Jedi don't really interfere in politics, maybe there's no reason to hide his true identity unless the Sith are unpopular in these local elections, which were given no indication one way or another where they are.
Well, and it was a big deal for them to intervene when they finally decided that Palpatine was trouble as chancellor, and they go to arrest him. That was a big deal. So we probably imagine they aren't doing this all the time. You know, the one thing that we haven't talked about that I think, you know, as we move forward into the politics that extends into the original trilogy, which is of course the more fun to talk about, but there's less politics there, and maybe there's something to that. Is, you know, the degree to which the reaction to oppression is, I think, fairly realistic to how things are. So, you know, now we are living in a world where there is an empire, and the citizens who are making their way around are living under the empire, and they have that oppressive of government, and they know it's there, and most of them don't really care that much. Luke is like, you know, hey, it's not that I love the empire, but it's a long ways away, and I don't, you know, I'm not interested. His uncle's like forbids him from getting involved in anything. Don't get messed up. And even Han Solo is, you know, doesn't want to get involved. You know, he doesn't like the empire, doesn't want to get involved in some sort of revolution. He's just trying to make his way through. And that, I think, is fairly realistic, right? That you would not have people, you know, rising up whenever there's an injustice, right? People tend to find a way to just live their lives underneath the cover of politics, especially if the reach of the empire is not deep into your day-to-day lives, which it appears not to be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously through most of human history, people were governed by political systems that were not Republican, which they didn't have any say in the government, and part of that reason is, as depicted with the Empire in the original 3 movies, episode 4, 5, and 6, people don't have as much military power as the government, and that's one reason that governments like that happen. But the other reason, right, is there is a huge collective action problem. And most people, even if they wanted to, you know, fight off their government, it's not in anyone's individual incentive to do that, because unless you know you're organized with a lot of other people who have a lot of resources, you're probably going to lose. So you won't help yourself and will only get killed, or most likely get killed. The possible third reason is that most people just aren't that interested in politics. So most people, we imagine when we think about politics, we imagine everybody in relationship to their political system. But most people, their passions, interests are something outside of politics. You know, maybe it's moisture farming,
right.
which is what Luke's aunt and uncle are in the movies depicted as doing for their business. Only through circumstance do these people sort of get pushed into political rebellion.
Yeah, well, and from the point of view of the empire, it's probably good to let the people let off steam here and have some local autonomy. I mean, one way in which empires can control territories that are far away from them is to, install a governor and make sure things go the right way, but otherwise let the locals rule themselves, right? So, on Tatooine you've got the Hutts sort of running things, right? And that's not the empire, but they're not going to go and mess with that unless they have to.
Yes.
And and on Cloud City, you've got Lando's running his own little mining operation, and the empire doesn't really care about that. He even says, we're small enough, we haven't really attracted their attention, until he attracts their attention. Then they come in and, okay, well, now we have a reason. We have to mess with and take over and influence what's happening. They're not afraid to do that, but having that letting off steam, letting people, maybe even having some smuggling is sort of necessary to let the system, play out, as long as it's not preventing the empire from doing whatever its goals are. And this is where the sort of political analysis breaks down, because what are the goals of the empire, as near as I can tell? It's just advancing the evil dark side, which is, probably not the goal of any particular politician. It's just evil.
And this is where you get, that the entire political system, it just isn't very well worked out in the movie. I mean, so if you, I believe I've seen George Lucas interviewed and asked, what makes the dark side bad or the Sith bad? And he says, I called it the dark side. Isn't that enough? Like I just, assume it's bad, and I have them do bad things. And what else do you want? So I mean, that's fine. It makes the show enjoyable, and that's fine. We're just asked to accept that, and it is depicted as doing some of the sort of bad things that empires do. Treating local treating local populations badly. Flying around the galaxy, making arbitrary decisions, like in Cloud City, and taking over taking over and making arbitrary decisions about local jurisdictions and things like that.
It's a metaphor, if anything, for what for bad government and badness, and sometimes those metaphors can be clunky, and that's fine. It's still exciting. It still plays out. But I think it says something that you can't tell a story about a hero who is going to emerge and overcome his humble beginnings and save the galaxy and so forth without laying out a political structure that they're fighting against. And oftentimes it's just like some evil tyrant king kind of thing, like in the Lord of the Rings or something, right? You just have this bad force that wants to. But if you want to have it happen in a more developed civilization like the Star Wars is supposed to do, then you've got to start to sketch in some of the political details. And not any more than are necessary to tell the story, but they're there, and that makes for interesting late night conversations between people who care about politics.